Mayor Eric M. Garcetti of Los Angeles discussed the fires this week at a news conference. Brittny, MejiaLos, Angeles Times, Los Angeles. There were visits to 2 fire sites, meetings with firefighters at command posts, and 2 news conferences 15 miles apart. And along the way, Mayor Eric M. Garcetti, sitting in the back of his S.U.V, offered a rolling tour Thursday of the city he grew up in with a seemingly intimate knowledge of the geography of what has been, by far, the most severe fire in his 6 years as mayor. "There's one of the lost homes," he said, pointing to a ridge along the 405 freeway as he headed to a television interview in Glendale. "Right there. But they saved the one at the end," as the car crossed the crest of the hill, opening onto an expansive view of the San Fernando Valley and mostly clear, blue skies. Mr. Garcetti remarked on how much conditions had changed since he made his first visit here on Tuesday morning, heading for a fire that had exploded overnight in Sylmar. That day, he could barely see across a valley thick with billowing black smoke. "Look at that," he said. "When we got here 2 days ago it was the thickest fog imaginable. I'll show you pictures. I'd never seen anything like that." Over the past 4 days, Mr. Garcetti has found himself weathering what seems to be an inevitable rite of passage for any mayor of Los Angeles responding to a natural disaster. As the fires began, Mr. Garcetti, who has lived through his share of fires and earthquakes, sought to reassure a citying the fast spread of out-of-control fires whipped by Santa Ana winds and with the potential to inflict catastrophic damage across wide swaths of the city. "These are days that break your heart," he said. "These are also days that show the resilience of our city." By Thursday night, with the smoke cleared and most of the flames gone, Mr. Garcetti appeared visibly relieved over how Los Angeles had been, at least relatively, spared. "This was hardly the most severe disaster California has endured. Fires in other parts of the state were more challenging to their elected leaders, and if one believes the predictions of geologists, the worst may be yet to come." But it offered some insight into the style of this mayor, something of a test after nearly 5 years in charge, and at a time when Mr. Garcetti has encouraged a bit of national attention by suggesting he may want to run for president. In Los Angeles, especially at moments like this, there are few jobs as critical as fire chief. And it was Ralph M. Terrazas, whom Mr. Garcetti promoted to fire chief soon after he became mayor, who appeared most at his side, offering technical updates on fire conditions and reports on how he was dispatching his 3,200-member force across this 500-square-mile city, where the speed of a response can determine whether a fire is a passing brush or a conflagration that forces the evacuation of thousands of homes. At the height of the disaster, 900 members of the Los Angeles Fire Department were spread out across the region, fighting 3 major fires and battling back scores of other outbursts. They were among an army of 2,000 firefighters, many of whom had come in from across the state to assist in the effort. 600 members of the city's police department were also assigned to the fires. Raphael J. Sonnenschein, executive director of the Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs at California State University, Los Angeles, said that this episode had spotlighted, at least for now, the strong relationship Mr. Garcetti had with his police commissioner and the fire commissioner. Those relations have frequently been strained with mayors in the past, and that has caused problems when the city had to come together. When the relationship between mayor and chief is toxic, think Bradley Gates, it's not good of either of them when disaster strikes. Mr. Sonnenschein said, referring to Tom Bradley, who was mayor of Los Angeles from 1973 to 1993, and Daryl Gates, his police chief. By the time Mr. Garcetti arrived on Thursday morning for a private briefing by fire and police officials at the command center for the Skirball fire, the blaze, which at one point loomed as a potentially major threat to some of Los Angeles' most affluent neighborhoods, was considered to be far less of a threat. But danger still loomed. The command post at the West Los Angeles Veterans Affairs campus, just off the 405 freeway, was bustling with firefighters and police officers. Mr. Garcetti, wearing a blue City Hall windbreaker emblazoned with his name, mingled with firefighters in front of the command post, comparing photographs of the fire on their phones and trading information on what they had heard in the field. Mr. Garcetti walked over to a map of the fire taped onto the wall as an assistant chief, Corey Rose, brought him up to date. The mayor duty scribbled notes, asking questions that reflected the decidedly technocratic spirit he has brought to City Hall. Example, what is the containment in rye? Do you know? The mayor asked, inquiring about a fire in Santa Clarita. The role of mayor in Los Angeles is almost vague by design, reflecting a cumbersome government system in Southern California that would seem to confound any attempt to manage a complicated crisis. There are 88 cities in Los Angeles County, with Los Angeles being the largest. The county is controlled by a 5-member board of supervisors. That means, more often than not, that it is the mayor who becomes the face of a crisis. But the mayor doesn't have the overall authority over the response. So when millions of Mr. Garcetti's constituents were startled Wednesday night by their phones buzzing with an emergency alert warning of extreme fire danger, the mayor had nothing to do with it. That alert was sent out by the state. Not that he would have blocked it, Mr. Garcetti said. I said over-communicate, he said. You saw how many people died up north, he added, referring to the Northern California fires in October. Mr. Garcetti has never been much of a showman, at least in the tradition of, say, Edward I Coker Rudolph W. Giuliani, 2 New York mayors who regularly became identified with the biggest crises of their cities. But when he turned up Tuesday morning for the first fire, he wore protective gear, the yellow jacket, and an official, mayor, Firefighters helmet. That was out of necessity, he said later, recalling the embers raining down from the sky. In this mayor's view, politicians in these kinds of settings should wear civilian clothes, and leave the uniforms to the officers. As he spoke, he picked up his firefighter helmet from the seat, and moved it to the back of the S.U.V. Correction: December 8, 2017. An earlier version of this article misstated how long Eric M. Garcetti has been mayor of Los Angeles. He has been in charge for nearly 5 years, not 6.